This is a Colorado Christmas cake, and today I'm going to show you the royal icing trees. I did a run out tree, which is using your consistency of 10-second flood icing and lining, and then I filigreed the tree on the top. Both of these trees, the outline is the exact same, and the design inside is what makes it different. So I'm going to show you how to do that. For the rest of the cake and decorations and how it was done, you can shoot on over to the post, Colorado Christmas, and it'll explain all of that. So let's begin. Okay, so I'm going to explain my little setup here. I have a piece of cellophane that you can get at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Joann's, pretty much any hobby store. It's flexible, so when you go to remove your royal icing trees, especially the filigree ones, it makes it a lot easier than if you were using acetate where you don't have a lot of give. And then underneath my cellophane, I have they're half sides of a tree, and Sydney was gracious enough to make my pattern for the filigree trees inside here. So this is her pattern, and the template will be available at my shop. For the run out, we're just going to fill it in, so that part won't matter, but they'll all be the same size because you're using the exact same tree. What I did to make it extremely taut, you want this cellophane to be as tight as you can possibly get it, is I have taped down both my template and my cellophane to my workstation. For this project, you do not need a lot of tools. I am using a 1.5 PME piping tip, but you can use a parchment paper cone and cut a small hole for outlining and filigreeing, and a little bit bigger for filling in your run out if you wanted to. I'm just more comfortable with a tip, so you wouldn't need a tip. You will need a scriber of some sort. You're going to want a soft brush. You don't really need this. Another scriber for your filigree. A wet paper towel to clean your tip. And then I have my plastic bag for my run out consistency, covered in a bag so that it stays moist. So let's begin. The first thing I'm going to show you is the run out one. And each of these have their own pluses and minuses. So since I am working on the run out, you want to outline your tree. And it is important to make sure that that line that is going to attach to your other trees is straight. So even though my daughter's an extremely good artist, we did use a ruler to make the back line. And that would be this line right here. When you go to attach them, especially the filigree one, it will make your life 10 times easier if they're straight. Since all of your trees are the same size, you won't have to worry about that. For the run out, the plus on this, and I'm just going to cut a little opening in my bag, and when I do run out, I'm going to check this to see if it's big enough of a hole. I tend to go too small, and I did. For when I'm doing runouts or collars or a wet on wet type of thing, if you look at my poinsettia video where I did the wet on wet, I find it to be a little bit easier to use a plastic bag than to use the parchment paper cone. Or you could even use a sandwich bag. You wouldn't have to even waste a piping bag on it. And you're just going to fill it in the same way you would do any type of cookie or collar that you normally do. What I did find worked best for this was to do it in little sections rather than going back and coming in from the top to bottom. This is a 10 seconds consistency, like I said, so it gives me plenty of time to fill it in. Now these are extremely quick to get done, as you can see. However, the trees that you saw on the Colorado Christmas cake took 2 days to dry, enough for me to be able to put them together. And they were still soft in the center. So that would be your only downside, is the time that it takes to dry. I would plan to not bake up or create my cake until these are completely ready. And I would make quite a few extras since they are so quick, because they fooled me quite a few times. I thought that they were dry, they felt dry, and I went to attach them and found that they were not dry. So like I said, it took about 2 days for them, and I won't even say they weren't even completely dry, they were just dry enough that I could go ahead and attach it. Which is fine, because then when you go to eat it, it's not hard. So that's all you have to do for this. You want to make sure to get inside your corners and that everything is nice and smooth. I would not go with anything more than a 10-second or anything less than 8 seconds, so you're not going to be able to control your flow. So that's your run out. You would at that point do all of the trees that you needed, and then I would wait 20 minutes and you can move them to a jelly roll or a cookie sheet that's turned upside down, and gently move it with the parchment or with the tracing paper underneath. For the filigree, it is a little bit more time consuming. I'm going to get a tad more comfortable here. I will tell you that you will need, depending on where you're putting your tree, whether it's a full tree or a half tree against the cake. For a half tree, you'll need between 3 and 5, depending on your cake size and your tree size, of your half trees here. So keep that in mind when you are piping out your trees. For the filigree, you're going to do the same part. You're going to outline the exact same way. I'm going to take a look and make sure I don't need to use my brush, and I don't, to move anything around. When choosing a design, it can be very tempting to choose something extravagant, but make sure that you are comfortable piping it. This is something you're going to be piping a lot of. It needs to fit within the tree. It cannot come outside your line, and every piece needs to touch another part of the royal icing. So every piped, so this is 2 S scrolls right here. They're touching up here. They're touching the back here. So everything needs to touch one another. The more you have your royal icing touching, the stronger your tree will be. So it can be tempting because it does take so long to pipe these out, to try and make it a little sparse in there. But when you go to remove them, you'll find that they break. So I'm going to pipe the bottom row. And then I'll show you the next step rather than you watching me pipe this whole tree, so we don't have a YouTube that goes on forever. You want to go as slow as you need to, keeping constant pressure as you are piping. And what I'm doing right here with this, what I'm taking is a dampened soft paintbrush. I believe this is a number 0. And I'm going in if I see that it did not touch or I didn't get a complete loop like on this one, and just fixing it. You don't want anything sticking up or looking jaggedy. Keep your finger on your tip. Use gravity as your friend to pipe your S's and C's. And mostly in this one is a design of some intricate S's and C's. The way that Sydney put it, the S's, the ones that have the loop underneath, come together almost like a heart shape. It's also important that each tree have the exact same design inside. So if you don't want to use my design, there are plenty of templates on the internet that you could use or in books. But make sure that you don't choose like 4 different designs, that you stay with the same design for your tree. You want all the sides to look the same. So I will finish piping this and we will come back and I will show you what comes next. Okay, so it's 2 days later, let's say, and we have our nice run out royal icing tree. And if you wanted to, you could do a wet on wet, just bringing in like maybe a thin 0, a piping tip that's a 0, and making the veins and the branches in there if you wanted to. I chose to keep mine completely white. But that's what you want, that's what you're looking for. So it's nice and smooth, it's shiny, it's beautiful. So that one's done. This is your Filigree, and I'm going to gently slide him so I can turn him over. And when I was talking about your cellophane, you see it's very movable. So if I wanted to, if he was still attached tightly, I could pick him up and gently just flip him over. So, and then put my tape back. At this point, it is not as crucial to keep this taut, although you don't want the cellophane to get in the way. The reason I'm keeping it here is A, I do not want to be piping on my graphite and make those marks, and B, I want to see my design. I am now piping not only backwards, but completely, I guess backwards and completely on the other side. So if I get confused or lost in my design, I can look and see what I'm doing. So what you're going to do, and as you saw, he was very thin, and so we need, excuse me, I'm starting to run place. We need to give him a little bit more strength. So we're going to go back to outlining him. It's imperative that your tip be cleaned and that you test it to make sure you've got a nice line that isn't curling. And I always keep a little rag here just in case. So we're going to outline the back side of our tree. We're going to attach our icing, come straight down the back side. I have a nice consistency, the consistency that I'm working with for both the outline of the filigree tree and the run-out tree for the outlining is soft consistency. And you're looking for something that almost looks like marshmallow without being, sticky like a marshmallow. If I'm a little bit dry when I'm talking right now, it is also because I'm concentrating. I'm going to outline the tree, giving it some strength. If I had tried to just put it together without doing this, number one, it would look odd because you would see the back side, and two, it would probably fall apart. So I'm going to go in and I can see just right there. I just need to move this line just a little bit over, so I'm going to use my little damp brush and gently coax my royal icing into where I want it to be. At this point, your filigree tree is extremely fragile. I broke so many of them last night. It was about 4 in the morning and I was still, I don't like that. I'm going to show you how to remove that. I'm just going to go in with your scriber very gently and lift the whole thing up and out. It's sticking to the royal icing back here, so we're going to get him off. I definitely don't want him on the back end because when I go to put them together, they won't set up right. I'm going to soften this down. Perfect. Okay. As I was saying, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I was getting extremely punchy. In fact, I realized it was time to stop piping and to go to bed. I must have fallen asleep because I woke up with the piping bag in hand, no icing coming out, completely clogged tip, and thought that I was piping. So it was definitely time for Bobbie to go to bed. But up until that point, I was doing pretty good. Once you get this on, it will still be fragile, but it won't be so fragile that you can't work with it or you're afraid to touch it. Type of thing. So pretty much you're reverse piping from what you did before. And you're making your same design. That's why I said it's tempting. The first couple times I did this, I thought, oh, I'm going to put this cool flower in there. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But then I realized I had to do it to 70 trees. Or 70 sides. And that I didn't want to do. If you make a mistake, it's no big deal. Remove it as quickly as possible. Gently with your scribing tool. Just lift up, royal icing. When you are piping your design, you're going to use constant pressure until, of course, you get to the end. Release, and just bring it up. I will tell you that my back hurts, my hands hurt, and that's normal. You might find that you're going to need to get into a nice hot tub to help your back out. You're going to be using muscles that you probably don't use all the time. I'm going to show you. Actually, I think I can fix him. I didn't like the way this one came out, but we can probably fix it up. When you are using your damp paintbrush, you almost want it dry. You just want it damp enough that your royal icing doesn't stick to it. You could, if you wanted to, put a completely run out tree on the top of your cake. You don't have to do this, or you could do all filigree if you want. Okay, so now we have filigreed all of our trees, or half trees, and we're going to put them together. So the first thing we want to do is make a 45-degree angle with two of our half trees. We're going to put a line of royal icing. Since I'm doing a 45-degree angle, I want to come down the line that I have my outside line, but in the inside of my outside line, so that I can connect it. I'm going to bring them together like so. And now we're just going to have fun waiting. So why don't I hold these and I'll see you on the next side. Okay, so we're back and they are stuck together pretty nicely. I went ahead and did two 45-degree angles, and we're going to put them together like this. So we're going to very gently, these are fragile, run a very, very thin layer, and I'm using a 1.5 PME tip. And if I didn't mention it before, I will mention it now. You wouldn't have to, for this project, actually have a tip. You could cut your parchment paper cone with a small hole that's about the same size as a PME 1.5 tip. So we're going to put them together. And again, we're just going to hold them until they are nice and firmly constructed and can handle the next few halves. So I will see you when these are together strongly. Hi, it's Bobbie from Bobbie's Baking Blog, and we now have our two 45-degree angles put together. And at this point you can look at your tree, and depending on how much space you have or how big your tree is will depend on how many more halves you need to put in. And it's anywhere from 5 to 8. And I would just say I make usually double of what I need for breakage and go from there. So it looks like at the moment, from looking down on it, I only need this last one. So I'm going to put this in, and it's going to go right here. So I'm going to put a line of icing on my edge, and I'm going to put it on as straight as possible with even pressure going all the way down. And remembering how fragile your tree is and how much work you've put into it, you're now just going to gently hold your piece together. If your tree needed to have more than just the 5, you would add the trees in where you have the holes until you symmetrically from looking down on your tree had a nice symmetrical tree. So I again bring back the Colorado Christmas cake that Sydney and I did together. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that you saw in the video that I didn't actually talk about when we were doing it. One of them is you saw me putting my tree together on these Wilton very, very soft foam pads. And the reason is because if it fell over or if my hand slipped, the tree, I actually kind of put two together, the tree would fall on the pad and I would not have to worry about breakage. So that worked out really well. The other thing that I did was I took a small circle cutter and I made a small piece of gum paste that is underneath my tree, which made attaching the tree to the cake 10 times easier than if I had just put the royal icing down and attached it. I didn't have to hold it as long. And as I said, the dragées went on after each tree was dried. And we added some powdered sugar, did some, there's some blue highlight dusting in there. As I said, most of that will be explained in the post, but I hope you enjoyed learning two different ways of doing the same pattern on a tree.